Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to Maxon Color. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining me today. And I hope you're all doing well today. It's a very nice sunny weather today outside. I'm based in Germany, by the way, and it's really nice weather here. And I hope it's the same wherever you are. And welcome to Maxon Color. And today, in today's episode, unfortunately, it's just me again. My co-host Diego cannot make it today because he has another presentations, a live event that he has to attend. So we'll take it back a little bit today, and it's just me. So be patient. We'll take it slow today. All right. And hi Pravin, thank you so much for joining. And Best and Hussein, hello, thank you for joining. And what is our agenda today? So our agenda today, we'll take a fresh air a little bit, instead of just like focusing on color grading. And today we'll just infuse a little bit of compositing, but we're not living our favorite environment, that is Resolve Color Page. So we'll try to use our knowledge of node compositing using nodes inside Resolve to create a green screen compositing inside Resolve. Can it be done? Well, let's see. I'm also excited to do that because I'm not a compositor, but hey, I think, in my opinion, if you're a colorist, knowing a little bit of compositing will help you, and especially if you're working with client, and if you have a request, that means you can score another business, right? You're not losing any business if you're saying no, right? So before we jump on to Resolve, let me just do a little housekeeping. So let me share my screen. Right. I hope you guys can see my screen. If you are into webinars, we have plenty of them. So at Maxon, we have plenty of webinars running from Monday until Friday. If you want to check them out, simply go to maxon.net/events. And there you will be able to see what type of webinars coming or what type of live events coming. For example, tomorrow, Hasi and Seth will be back on VFX and Chill. So if you're actually really into compositing and doing VFX, those are the best show that you can tune into. But today, we'll try to replicate that inside Resolve, right? And also on Monday, there is a demystifying post-productions webinar happening, focus on universe. So that is also a coincidence because today we'll do a lot of creative stuff with universe tools inside Resolve as well on our compositing, right? And and also, if you are new to the show and if you haven't get your merchandise, please get one. Please get so. I think I posted it in the chat previously. I think at the very beginning, you can use the link, and in order to enter the shop, you will need the secret code. And the secret code for today, where's my cursor? The secret code for today is Universe for Editors. Okay. Universe for Editors. Okay, let me just bring it up. There you go. So to enter the shop, use that link and paste the secret code, and you'll be able to enter the shop. And you won't have to pay anything. It's zero. The price will be zero. You just need to pay a small shipping cost. Okay. And you're probably wondering, right, if this is recorded or not. The answer is yes. We always record our webinars, and it will be stored in our YouTube channel, Maxon Training Team. So if you go to Maxon Training Teams, you can actually watch every webinars that we ever had. And what's nice on that webinar is that those are time-stamped. So if you just want to skip to the subject that you're really interested to, you can go to the descriptions and then go to the timestamps. And like, for example, if we go to Maxon Color webinar, and for example, we had a webinar last year with Javier, and if you like to watch that, and you go to the descriptions, show more, and you'll see all of this neat timestamps, so you can like jump right into the topics. And thank you so much, Dr. Sasi, for doing the timestamps. You are awesome. All right, so Maxon training team to check all the webinars hosted by Maxon. Okay, so now, is there any questions? Let me check the chat. Hussein is saying, what a big coincidence. Live notifications popped up while I was struggling with Resolve. Oh man, awesome. Hope you can benefit from the show. But today, as I mentioned before, we'll focus more on the compositing aspects. And I hope that you'll be benefit from that as well. But if you want to know more, you can simply just go to the playlist Maxon Color and check out the previous episode. We have plenty of the episode, especially the one with the tag Back to Basics. You'll get to know more about that, about the basic stuff in color grading, right? So if you came from the social media, you probably saw the social post. Thank you, Michael, for doing the social post. It was really great, and really great that you to have you doing that. And I think I will show you what we are going to create today. So we will try to create something like this. Alrighty. Cool. Yes. So I have my Resolve open, and as you can see, the effect is already there, but don't worry, we'll create it from scratch. I just want to show you that we managed to take the clip from here into this, okay? And all of that only by doing a simple compositing inside Resolve Color Page. And I hope that you already have the knowledge of the different types of nodes inside Resolve, because I don't think we will be covering the basic of what is serial node, what is an outside node, what is a parallel mix or layer mixer or something like that, because those are the tools that we will be doing today. All right. So instead of creating a new versions and work on that, let me just create a new. Let me just drop the clips in the edit page and just create the new compositing from the new clip. All right. So, or I don't want to, trim the clip again. Let's just create a new versions and work from that. And versions, local versions, create new version. All right, version 2. We're in version 2, and here I'm just going to press Control Home to reset everything. Or you can do exactly the same by right-click and select Reset All Grades and Nodes. The shortcut will be Control Home on Windows. I'm not sure about the Mac, right? So if we scrub through, you see that we have like this nice clip of the lady playing around with the fabrics, right? And first of all, we need to key out the background. Like normally, we just want to remove the background and add another clips as a background, right? So in order to do that, you probably already aware that we need to key out using a keyer tool. And if you're in Fusions, there is a tool called Delta Keyer, which is like really powerful, and we can use that. But sadly, when we are in Color Page, so for example, if I'm searching for Delta Keyer, there's nothing there because Delta Keyers only live in Fusion Page. So in order to do that, we can use the keyer inside Resolve Color Page. And normally when we are moving to Qualifier or the keyer, normally we have like this Qualifier HSL keyer, right? But if you go to the top, to the right, you'll see that we have several different keyer. We have the RGB qualifier, we have the Luma qualifier, and we have 3D qualifier. let's use 3D. And I'll show you why I use 3D instead of the other gear. And to use 3D, by default, you already switched into the eyedropper tools. You know, as soon as you select gear, you'll be switch into the eyedropper tools if you see my cursor. And in order to do that, we just need to select the sampling area. And in this case, I'll just draw the area that I want to sample. Okay, and if I press highlight, I'll see that, okay, I actually want to key out the green and retain the person. And in order to do that, we just need to invert it, right? And in order to invert that, we have here invert functions right there. Okay, let me just press invert. Okay, and perhaps in order to, instead of using this viewer, this normal gray highlight here, let's use the high contrast one. And just like that, and I'll switch my tool. Instead of pick up the samples, I will be adding samples, and I'll use this one. And I'll just draw this and something like that. Okay, now here's a neat thing. Okay, you're probably seeing my traces here, my path, the one that I'm sampling. And in order to deactivate that or activate that, here's the command. Here's the control, the tool, show path over there. All right, so if I press that, I don't see my path anymore, right? So just leave it, no problem. Okay, and now we can play around with the clean black and clean white. And in this case, let me just clean the white slightly. All right, it's over here. Okay, and clean the blacks a little bit more. All right, now if we switch back to highlight, it's already okay, but you still see that there's a spilled green color, green hue in our subject. And in order to remove that, instead of creating a new samples area here, in 3D here, there is like this option called despill, and that's the reason why I choose to use the 3D keyer instead of the HSL keyer or qualifier. Okay, let me just crank up the despill. So as you can see, before, after. All right, simple, right? Now, okay, so now we can do the, how do you call it, the other adjustment. Okay, I probably would like to color correct my subject as well, but instead of doing that now, I will see how it looked like on top of the background. Okay, so I will just create a spare node. Like here, I create another 2 serial node by pressing Alt S, or the command would be like right click, add node, and select corrector, and then put it here, like so. If I want to do that, let's create corrector node and just drag and drop it to the line. Okay, so I can also do that. But here is the thing. Here we have a key, and I want to port this key information to the last node that I am going to have in this row. Right? So in order to do that, here in the first node, you can see like this. Let me make it bigger. You can really see that it has like this green box and blue box. And in order to port the key or the alpha informations of this particular node, you simply just need to patch this up. All right? As simple as that. And if we press highlight on this node number 2, you'll see that we have still the same informations, but here we have like just the subject. Okay, so let's bring our background into the comp. Right, let's choose what background we want to use. Yeah, we have like this forest background over here. So in order to bring the background as a matte, you can simply just drag it from media file and just drag it to your node editor. As simple as this. Bam. Okay, so when you're dragging your matte into the composite into your node editor, you'll see that it has 5 different output here. So the one on the top is the, I think it's the alpha, the alpha, and then the R, G, and B, and then the green one is like the combinations of everything. So if I press Alt S, I'll get like the informations, all the information from this previous node transferred to this one. So if we press highlight, we see that, okay, we got it. Let me just create another extra node in case I want to do another adjustment later on. Okay, so now the question is, how do I mix that? Let me just switch it off, this highlight. How do I mix that? Well, in Resolve, there are 2 types of like mixing operations. Well, 3 types of mixing operations. That is like by using parallel mixer or by using layer mixer, right? Without going into too much detail, parallel mixer will mix everything as equal, and we don't want that. We want to use the layer mixer because layer mixer has priority on the bottom layer. So if I create layer mixer, right click, add node, and layer mixer, and here if I patch my information from here and my output from node number 3 into the input of layer mixer, and patch the layer mixer into the output, you can see that, as simple as that, right? So if I change it into parallel mixer, you see nothing happened because everything is like blend equally, and we don't want that. And we want to do layer mixer, right? So now, could you zoom in more in the nodal part? Of course, sure. Let me know, guys, anytime you have like a difficulty seeing or things like that, let me know in the chat, okay? So let's do this. Is it better, Frederick? So let's name it. Why not? So here we have our subject, and here our background, right? BG. Awesome. And now we have everything mixed, but we want to, you know, to make this more like believable, right? We want to make this more believable. And if we check, if we disable the background, okay, let me just do this because my face is right on top of the vector scope. I don't want that. So if we disable the background, you can really see that the contrast ratio of the subject is like that much. Meanwhile, the background, look at that, it has like more contrast ratio, right? And what we can do is that we can try to balance our background a little bit. So what we can do is that we can reduce the contrast of our background, perhaps something like this, and reduce the exposure just slightly, something like that. And we can also do the same thing with our subject. So for example, my subject looks too red in this like world, and I can try to balance that using my offset. For example, let me just reduce red. I'm on node number 2. I'm reducing red, not too much, like not like that, but just, you know. Oh, by the way, by rolling the mouse wheel, you can have like a very small increment in your adjustment. Okay, so I will reduce red, and I will add more yellow because it seems like, it feels like it has more yellow in the background. And to do that, we'll reduce blue, because as soon as we reduce blue, the opposite color coming in, right? What's the opposite color of blue? It's yellow. You're correct. All right, let's reduce blue a little bit. And now it seems like the lighting is a little bit wrong. She looks like in the subject, you can really see that the light seems to be coming from the left side. Meanwhile, you see the how do you call it, the source of light in our forest. Let me just disable this. It seems like the source of light is coming like somewhere over there, right? So we can try to do that. We can balance that. And in order to do that, instead of let me just put my waveform back, so it will be behind my face. Bear in mind. So in order to change the lighting pattern, we can go to Power Windows. Let's go to Power Windows and just drop in the the gradient window, right? And I am still on this node number 2, by the way. Or if I don't want to, I perhaps can use node number 4 and do the separate adjustment there, right? So here, I will just add the exposure a little bit, add the offset slightly, before, after. And it feels like it's a little bit too cold, and we can warm it up by, we can add red with the offset control, or we can just use the temperature and tint control over here, right? So temperature and tint slightly. So before, after. Okay. And before the balance, after the balance. So both of them, before, after. Okay. And we can also play around with the exposure of the background. It feels like I can make it a little bit more warmer, something like that, and put it towards slightly more to the red. Okay. Before and after. Alrighty. Now we can play around with the with the fun stuff now. Now let's focus on the fun stuff. As you can see, before we have like all the swirly colors behind her, and if you can see that, like here, you can really see that there is still this like hard lines right on the edges of our mask, right? And if you ever use Supercom, there's like a very tiny, there's a very neat tool that you can use to tackle this issue, and that is by using like the light wrap, right? But we don't have Supercom in Resolve. I wish we have Supercom in Resolve. And how do we do that? And the way to do that is that, I think the theory behind it is that we need to track the edges of our mask, and then after that, I don't know, perhaps infuse some glow in it and blur it and make it unsharp, probably, right? So we can do that, and we can try to track the edges of our mask over here. And if you remember, we already created a mask before, right? So if I go to node number 1 and press this, you see we have a mask. So perhaps let's create a new corrector node, and let's feed this mask into the input of node number 10. And I'll create another one, and you'll see why. All right? And I'll use exactly the same information as the previous one. So I have exactly the same mask here, and node number 4 and node number 11. I have exactly the same informations, but I want to mix them. And on the way mixing them, I can just detect the edges, right? And in order to do that, let's use key mixer. There you go. So we have parallel mixer, we have layer mixer, and for keys, we have the key mixer, right? So we can just port out the output from node number 4 and node number 5 into the key mixer. And here, if we go to our key, you can really see that, okay, this is the informations that we are dealing with, like here, this. Right? So how do I just get the edges instead of like the whole mask? So I think what we can do is that we can try to invert the input link number 1. And from there, on the input link number 2, we can intersect them, right? So invert on the input link number 1 and intersect them in the input link number 2, right? So now I will feed this into a new node. So here I'll feed this into the input, the mask input, the alpha input of node number 9 after the combinations of my foreground and my background, right? So here on node number 9, I'm dealing with this, right? So perhaps I can introduce glow. And there are plenty of glow tools available. And I want to show you the universe glow, right? We can use edge glow because edge glow is also just like detecting the edge and then add the glow to the edge, right? But why not? Let's just use glow, right? So here is our glow. Let me just zoom in. Before glow, after. Before, after. Okay, just a teeny tiny, a little bit of glow. And I think this is fine. So, and by default, if you go to color, open the drop down, you'll see that we have color number 1 and color number 2. So we can actually mix some color into the glow. But what color should we use? Well, our subject is standing right in front of the background, right? And the background is very rich in green and yellow color. So how do I pick that? Well, I can just pick that using this picker here, right? But if I'm doing that, bear in mind that picker is like a very accurate tool. So it's just pick some like number of pixels on the tip, right? And I don't want to do that because otherwise I'm not quite sure what type of like color my pixels is like sampled from that picker. So in order to do that, we can just temporarily blur the background, okay? So by blurring it, we're mixing all those pixel informations together, right? And from here, we'll just select the color number 1 and perhaps make it this nice yellow over here, and color number 2, cancel it, and I'll pick this slightly olive green over here. Okay, something like that. And now we're done picking it, and we can just reset the blur. So we don't want the blur. And there you go. I think you can really see that behind her head and so on. So I think this is like the poor man light wrap versions, right? Okay. And now we can still play around with the intensity and so on. That's your creative decisions. So whenever you have time, play around with it, okay? Maybe I will just increase the patch from 5 to 7, something like that, so it looks better. Now, before we also have like a swirly rainbow around her as well, right? And we can also use that, and we can reuse this informations to do that. And in order to do that, I'll create a new corrector node, or hang on, I'll create a parallel mix, because in a parallel mixer, everything is mixed equally. So the shortcut for parallel mixer is Alt P for parallel, right? So here, and in node number 10 here, you can see that there is also the input, alpha input. So I'll just take exactly the same alpha input, and we're dealing with exactly the same stuff. Now here, instead of using glow, I will use, hey, let's check if we can use chromatic glow. Not really. I will use chromatic aberrations. That is from Universe Distorted, by the way. So Hang on, hang on. Yeah, there you go. And we can play around with the distortion amount, the scale, or the rotations. But hang on, why it's affecting all the image instead of the line? So let me just go back quickly to my version number 1. So the idea is that I just want to create this instead of like the previous one. What's happened? You know what? Let's just copy that. That's cheating. But hey, load version number 2, and let's just try to paste it here. There you go. What was wrong before? So let me just reset this. I was using Universe Chromatic Aberrations, but why it's not picking up the... Is it presets? It comes with a lot of presets, by the way, guys. Look at that. But, you know, instead of making things complicated, let me just reset this and paste my previous one. And whenever we have time, we'll take a look into that later. Okay? So now, we have like this a chromatic aberrations glow things around her, like this hello. But we want to have like the similar things happening to the background as well, right? And how do I do that? And in order to do that, there is like this new tool inside Universe that allows you to have like this chromatic like warp happenings in your image. It's like distorting your image by adding like a lot of like a chromatic aberrations onto it. And there are plenty of like controls that you can animate. So the tools is called ChromaTown, this one. Now, instead of applying ChromaTown in the mask, in this line over here, I will apply the ChromaTown into the background, simply just by doing that, right? So this is it. This is ChromaTown by default, right? So if we want to, we can perhaps try to animate ChromaTown to have it moving. So perhaps from here, it goes from 90, and at the end it goes to, I don't know, 180, something like that. So as we move, it's like giving you like this warping effect. Boom, right? So that's ChromaTown. Now let's name it ChromaTown. And here is our glow. And here's our chromatic aberrations, right? And we have our grad exposure and our balance. Okay. Now, to make things more interesting in this one, I think adding another glow onto the background will be nice, right? In order to do that, perhaps we can search for exactly the same glow that we're using for the line, but except instead of having it on her, let's have it on the background. Yes. Looks good. Don't you agree? So here, perhaps we can warm up the glow by picking up maybe like this orangey color as color number 1. And color number 2 will be something around like this reddish tinge. And crank up the color strength. It's here. So, color strength. Okay. Oh, by the way, guys, neat tip here over here. Some of the universe tool has like a lot of parameters. Like sometimes like this page will not be enough. And if that's the case, I mean, you can also like just scroll it, right? So for example, tools like Misfire. Like a tool like Misfire, it has plenty of like parameters like that. I mean, of course, you can just scroll it up and down. But if you don't want to scroll it, in Resolve, there's like this neat shortcut to view the viewer in the full page view. It's called full page view, and the shortcut is Shift F. There you go. You have like this, just the viewer without the node editor and your OFX, right? So that's full page view. Of course, you can turn on the node editor by doing that, right? But I find it like really nice whenever working with OFX with a lot of parameters, like Misfire, for example. So let's go back to normal view, Shift F again, and have our node open. And we don't want the Misfire here. Okay, we have our glow, and let's check. This is before and this is after. Without the background, it looks like that. Without the glow, I like it with glow. Without the chromatic aberrations, with the chromatic aberrations, right? So from now, I will call that, you know, my compositions is finished, and now I can just move into the fun part, the part that I really love the most, the grading part. And since we are in the color page, we don't need to, you know, move to another page, or if you are in the another software, you don't have to export it and do an XML round trip to Resolve and back out again. So we're here, we're in color page, and we can do the stuff that is familiar to us, and we can do our grading. So let's try to emulate the film looks. And if you are using Magic Bullet, you probably already know that you can use Magic Bullet, you can use Film Print, but you know, if you just use Resolve, you can also do that simply by using the LUT that come with Resolve, right? So let's do the Film Print emulations with Resolve. And before applying the film looks from Resolve, you need to understand that some LUT is like a really picky one, because it is really, how do you call it? It demands you to how do you call it? To prepare a suitable working conditions for them. You know, some LUT has like a very, how do you call it? Very obvious like input. It has a very obvious name sometimes. But if you don't have like a LUT which is named like very like obviously, you can open LUT in the text editor, and sometimes you can see like the extra informations on the text editor, right? So for example, the film looks that coming in that shipped with Resolve, it needs to work in a Rec 709 color space, the small color space, the display color space, but the gamma need to be set into Cineon film lock, right? So before we're applying our LUT, we can change the color space informations, and to do that, we'll use the color space transform. And here, this is a Rec 709 images, by the way. So I should have used some log images to give you a nice example, but you know, sometimes it happens, and I'm not really recommending you to work in Rec 709, but when we are working with Rec 709, this is the way you can do that. So this is Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, and we will target Rec 709 and use Cineon film lock, right? And now on the node after that, we can click LUT and use film looks and use any of the LUT that ship with Resolve. In this case, I'll use my Kodak 2383 D55, which I really love it. Okay, so before the film print emulation, it looks like this. With film print emulations, it looks like that. I like it. How do you guys like it? So, bear in mind when we are doing like our film print emulations. So this is before. Let me open my waveform. There you go. Can you guys see the waveform? I hope so. So before the film print emulations, we have a really nice blacks here. You can really see that the blacks is like almost hitting 0. But after the film emulations, our blacks is lifted, right? So if you like a clean and deep blacks, we can do that. I'll create a node after my lot just to tame the blacks down. Okay, let me just go to the shadow. The primary is lock wheel, and using shadow control, I'll just bring my blacks down somewhere like this. There you go. Uh-oh, too much. Maybe around 3. 3 is nice. So before and after. So now I'm ready to grade. Now let me just do a compound node here. And this is a compound node. I'll call the FPE, the film print emulations, with 2383. Just like that. All right. So now this is ready for output, but I want to grade below that. So I will reduce the contrast ratio, for example. I can do that by using my primaries wheel, because at the moment this is just a Rec 709 images. I can use my contrast to reduce the contrast ratio a little bit and drop my offset down. And maybe it's a little bit too much, maybe 0.87, something like that. So before, after, and I probably can drop my exposure slightly more. Okay, that feels a little bit much. Lift it up a little bit. Before, after, and that's it. And this is like the exposure and the contrast, but if you want to separate them into 2 different nodes, you absolutely can. Now, in order to sell the image, to make it like believable and so on, let me just add a little bit more texture onto it. And in order to do that, you probably already know the tricks. Film grain. Okay, let's use film grain to add some texture onto it. And you know, if you have Magic Bullet Suite, there's like this tool called Renoiser, which is really awesome because it applies grain in red, green, and blue channel. And it's not just apply a layer of grain, it creates a virtual grain on your image. Well, the name is kind of like confusing because it's Renoiser. Sometimes people think like, I don't want to add noise on my image, I want to add grain. So, you know, you can add Renoiser. In this case, I'll add it right at the end of my image, right? So here, I have my Renoiser. And let's add something like very, how do you call it? Very obvious. And it comes with a lot of preset. It comes with a lot of presets. Let's choose like a very obvious preset, like 16mm. Still not obvious enough. Super 8. Yes. You probably can see that now, right? And look at that. Look at her face. Look at the cheek area before the grain and after the grain. So it's not just like applying a a layer on top of your image, it's actually pushing the pixels in your image. So let me make it log grain. Let's check if it's monochrome. No, just leave it like this. Or maybe make it monochrome, but select the 16 millimeters. Yeah, something like this. Maybe add the grain amount slightly more, 85. And here what I'm talking about. You can add grains, you can add the amount and the size in 3 different color channels. So for example, if I want to add just in the blue channel, make the grain in the blue channel bigger, which is it's already the case, I can do that just by doing this. Or if I want less grain in the shadow, I can do this. Less grain in the highlight. So most of the grain will be in the midtone. So you can do that. And also what's nice with a Renoiser is that before applying the grain, there's like this control to add sharpening. So if I want to sharpen my image just slightly, maybe around 15, I can do this. Just add 15 in the sharpening. So before Renoiser, after Renoiser, let me just zoom in on her face. Somewhere like that. Before Renoiser, after Renoiser. I think you can see that in the feed as well, right? So that is quick compositing inside Resolve Color Page. And now what I want to do is that perhaps what we forgot to do previously is that, you know, we can actually slightly blur the background. But since we already have ChromaTown applied, I don't think that we need to blur the background. So in case you don't apply the ChromaTown and you don't apply this Chromatic Aberrations, and you just want to have this and you want to make it slightly more believable, you probably see that the background is sharper than our subject, and we can blur the background. And by blurring the background, we can simply go to the blur tools and just blur it. But instead of doing just the blurring, let's change the gamma into linear, and that is by right-clicking gamma linear. So I'm staying in exactly the color space that I am working in, but I'm just changing the gamma from whatever gamma I set in my project into linear and round trip back to my working space gamma. And in this case, I'll just blur it slightly, not too much, of course. Just like this. And if you're aware, the blurring in lens, normally there's a change in the size, right? As you got the bokeh, normally the image grows a little bit. The scale is getting bigger a little bit. And we can do that. And in the same node, I'll go to the sizing. And instead of input sizing, I'll select node sizing. It means that just in this node, the sizing will take effect. And in this case, I'll zoom in a little bit, maybe not too much, something like that. So before, after. But since we have ChromaTown applied, I don't think this matters anymore. But just leave it there, okay? So that is quick compositing inside Resolve. And using exactly the same techniques, you can create this. And this is just by using exactly the same techniques like before, but we're using different tools inside Universe, right? So in this case, this one, we have the subject over here. So the subject is just a red parrot, and we key it. I keyed it exactly using the 3D qualifier. And I reposition the image. So hold on, from there to there. And that is also by using the node sizing, okay? And I also applied the grad input, grad exposure onto my subject. See, I add a light with a slightly warmer tint on the bird's face. And from there, I mixed it with my background. And without the background, it looks like that. Without the fire, it looks like that. Hold on, let me just turn off the fire. So, oh, what's happening? So, there you go. Adding the background is exactly the same technique like before. You see, I blurred the background slightly, so it's like emulating the look of a blurring in lens. You know, as it gets blur, the image increases in size a little bit. And there's exposure and contrast adjustment to the background. And this is the universe tool that I use to create this text, the desert eagle. So the final, how do you call it? The final video looks something like this. Let me just play it. Yeah, something like that. So typecast. So typecast is creating the, how do you call it, the text without having a text in your edit page. So I don't use any text here. So I'm just staying inside color page, and by using typecast, if I press edit text, I can type any how do you call it, text that I want. So instead of desert eagle, maybe I should put desert parrot. There you go. And perhaps reduce it slightly. There you go, desert parrot. And as I scrub it, it moves like just like that, the desert parrot. And in order to emulate like this distortion happening, because we have fire like in front of the text, I used the universe tools called the heat wave. And without heat wave, it looks boring, something like that. So to make it more believable, let's enable the heat wave. So there you go. Now I add some fire, and here I'm just resizing the fire. But if you notice, the fire has a black background. And in order to move, like to key out this black background, I use the tools called Unmult inside Universe. So Universe is a collection of like over 100 of tools, and it range from like effects and generators. And the best way to see what Universe tools really are is that simply by going to Maxon website, go to Products, Universe, and you see in the generators, you'll see that there are plenty of like generators. So as you hover over each tool, you can really see what each tool is actually doing. So I use mostly stuff inside the effects. Here's the ChromaTown. We have box, bokeh, electrify, and text. And also, if you're into editing, probably you'll love transitions. There are plenty of transitions to play around inside Universe. So that is Universe. So in this case, I just applied Unmult, and same technique. I'm applying glow for the, you know, the poor man, how do you call it, light wrap. And from here on, it's just grading. Adding like a color density. So as a color getting brighter, as a color getting more saturations, it gets darker density. And I think we talked about that a lot in this channel, and we did that like plenty a lot in the previous episodes. But if you want to know, it's just this. Let me just delete. It's just creating like this, going into HSV, disable channel 1, disable channel 2, and from now on you can increase the gain, as you can see, as it increase the saturations, or you can increase the gamma. As you increase the saturations, the color gets darker. So because you are now in HSV, your lift gamma gain is not lift gamma gain anymore, but it's hue, saturations, and value, right? So that's another thing. And again, I apply grain, same like before, but at the end, I use Carousel. So what is Carousel? Carousel is like, so this is before Carousel. Big stuff of the grading is coming from the Carousel. And Carousel is like the effect that gives you like this vintage look. Along with it, you get like the frame. You can choose if it's like 16:9 or 16:9 soft or square, or square soft in this case if you want to. So in this case, I'll just select 16:9, and you have like a color treatment, color process. So if I don't like the grade from Carousel, and if I want to do it by hand, I'll just reduce it and reduce everything from here, contrast, fading, everything. I'll just reduce it, and I can grade it by hands, right? But in this case, I chose to have it graded through the Carousel. And also, we have a light leaks. We can create the light leaks, and we can also color the light leaks. So that's Carousel, to add like this film frame onto your image. So now that is like a two compositing scenes with exactly the same techniques. Is there any questions in the chat? What a big coincidence. Okay, I'm lost in AUV export when I try to have untone export instead. Well, Hussein, if you have questions about AOV, write us in the Maxon training team, training@maxon.net, and hopefully we'll get back to you. I mean, we will get back to you. And Bollywood style, yeah, I like it. And yeah, the next thing is like, let me quickly show you, instead of creating it from scratch, that, you know, when you want to play around with the this type of compositing inside the Resolve Color Page, it doesn't have to be like a green screen compositing. For example, I can play around with the stuff like this, right? The idea of this is like, of course, this is not like exactly the same thing that I'm trying to recreate, but like last year I went to the cinema and watched The Batman, and oh, I really loved the movie, like really loved the movie. And a week later, they released like the deleted scenes with the potential villain of the movie, and it has like it was set on a prison chamber with a glass with like this wires going on, something like this, and it was like, oh, it was really nice one. And when I am playing around with a ray gun, where in Universe, it kind of reminds me of that scene. So in order to like recreate that, instead of like shooting it from the scratch, I thought it's like, hey, let's play around with Universe. Maybe we can create something like that. And yeah, we can try quickly creating this. So let's create new version number 2, and in the version number 2 we'll just press Control Home. Okay, so this is the image that we are starting, that we begin our journey. Now, instead of like balancing the image first and so on and so forth, I want to play around with a ray gun. So Frederick, that is a perfect question. So Frederick has a question. What is the advantage of VFX in the color part, in the color page, probably she meant, compared to Fusions? Well, in Fusions, you can do much more things. And in my opinion is that color page, You can do it either in Color Page or in Fusions. But in Color Page, if you're a colorist and you're not like comfortable in Fusions, you can still do that because it is just working exactly the same way. We're just using nodes, but some tools in Color Page not available in Fusions, some tools in Fusions not available in Color Page. So it's always plus and minus. I think the biggest benefit is that if you are not comfortable with Fusions, you can just stay in Color Page, right? But I think, of course, I mean, learning Fusions is always a plus advantage for you. If you can do that in Fusions, perfect, because Universe also available in Fusions. If you want to play around with Universe inside Fusions, you can do that. And like I mentioned before, the Delta keyer, I love it, instead of using the keyers in Color Page. But we can use them and we can do compositing inside Color Page. I hope that answered your question. Okay. So now let's use Array Gun. Array Gun is one of the generators from Universe FX, and by default it gives you like this array. So first thing first, let's change the blend mode. Let's change it to screen, and instead of having like this nice shape, I just want the line, right? So under shape, I disable the draw shape grid. So no more shape, just the line. Okay, now in line, we can draw a subdivisions, okay? And maybe we increase it to around 8, and here around 10, or maybe less than 8. Maybe this is 8, and this is 12, something like that. So we have kind of like a rectangle. Now we can try to stretch this. How do you call it? The array. So in order to do that, we can try to play around with the scale, something like this, and the scale Y, something like that. Perhaps it's a little bit much, maybe around 10, and here around 6. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so I'm pretty much done with my Array Gun. Of course, it looks nothing like the previous versions, but that's because, you know, we need to degrade our image further. So I'll create a node after this and before that. So to create a node after the serial node after a selected node is Alt S, and to create a serial node before the selected node is Shift S. Okay, so yeah, hang on, perhaps I should create a parallel node. Sorry, I press Control F. So Alt P, okay. So let's just create a temporary node. Oh, you probably see that my mouse is running out of battery. So I want to like displace the image because at the moment it just looks too pretty and too perfect, and in order to displace the image, looks like it was a shot through a glass, and in Universe I can use the tools called Prism Displacement, and I can use Prism Displacement in node number 6 right under my node number 5, and here maybe let's play around with the presets, minor refractions, something like that. Oh, he looks really funny. And maybe change the glass refraction slightly, something just like that. So we have like this small amount of, how do you call it, displacement going on. So now I want to sell the idea that this line, this grid, is actually a glass. And in order to do that, probably I want to add texture. And I can create a node after that. And here I'll use Texturize from Universe. And Texturize is a collection of tools, collections of textures that you can apply to your image. And we don't have glass, but maybe I can use this weathered rock or concrete hose. No. Grimy bricks. No, I don't want bricks. Weathered rock. Well, I already chose that. So, porous concrete, something like this. Okay, and you can change the blend mode, multiply, screen. Let's just stay with multiply to darken the image. And then now we can blur the texture, right? I'll just blur it, not too much, maybe around 2, and reduce the contrast slightly and reduce the opacity like quite a lot. Okay, so I have my texture after the line, and I also want the texture before the grid. Okay, so I'll use exactly the same texture, but here let's just use cracked wall. That's fine. Again, reduce opacity around 80, maybe more, and blur the texture slightly, something like this, and reduce the contrast. Okay, so I have the texture like sandwiching the line. Okay, but now I feel that, okay, the person is like looking like displaced, but not the line. I need the line to look slightly displaced as well. And in order to do that, perhaps we can create a node after the line to do exactly the same prism displacement. And maybe we can just copy this, copy and paste. There you go. Now the line is also displaced, and we can play around with a glass refraction, something like this. Okay, and in the line, instead of having it like a horizontal like this, maybe we can rotate it slightly. Here, angle, we can just rotate it slightly, just like that. Okay, and there you go. And now we can create some glow to our image, but instead of doing that, perhaps we can try to balance our image first. If you remember, the scene was quite dark and our image is quite bright and magenta-ish. So instead of leaving it like this, let me just reduce red in our image. And as I reduce red, we are introducing the opposite color of red, the cyan, right? And let's just reduce blue slightly more. Maybe something like that. And after that, we can reduce the contrast, just not too much, something around 7.7, and change the pivot. And now we can bring the exposure slightly down. Before, after, maybe more, something like this. Okay, and now we can add chromatic aberrations. Chromatic aberrations. And we'll add it here. And to have like this sort of effects, as if it was, you know, shot through a glass. And after the chromatic aberrations, as we already like know before, we want to blur our image because it is behind the glass, and we don't want like super sharp image. And we can go to linear gamma, right click gamma linear, go to the blur page, blur it, and you know, while we're blurring it, we can also go to node sizing, increase the zoom just slightly, again to sell the idea that this was, you know, the blur happening on the lens. And now we can perhaps add glow to our image to make it more interesting. And we can add the glow in the stack of effect here. So go to universe, glow, add glow, something like that. And if you remember before, as I mentioned before, we have like the input channel. It can take the input either from all the color channel, RGB and alpha, or just the lightness, or just the luminance, or we can take it from the green, or the red, or the blue. Okay, so let's try to play around with the green a little bit. Reduce the saturation slightly, and play around with the threshold. Maybe not that much. Change it. You know what? Let's just set to RGBA. But I don't know. I kind of like the green more. Yeah. And here we can play around with the color strength, and then also play around with the aberrations. The green scale. Does it do anything? Nope. Okay. We can slightly darken the image by reducing the gamma, or increasing the gamma and brightening the image. Let's just reduce it slightly. So something like that. If you want more glow, you can crank up the intensity, but we don't want that. I can just bring it slightly down. And if you want to affect the highlights here, probably I'll go to my balance and go to my gain, and in my gain area probably just increase green slightly, something like that. Okay, now we already have it, and now we can create something that, you know, something to wrap all the effects. And to do that, perhaps we can do a lens vignette. Okay, and to do a lens vignette, I'll go to my power window, create the circular window. All right, draw the lens area here, and then increase the softness. Okay, and if I'm doing any adjustment right now, I'm doing it right in the middle of my window, right? So here, I don't want it. I want to invert it. Something like that. Okay, so here, as before, we can work in linear gamma simply just by selecting gamma, linear, and again blur it slightly more, so it's like really detuned lenses. And we can reduce the exposure. Since we are in linear gamma, what is exposure really? Exposure is just a gain operations in linear gamma, right? So we can use our gain and drop it down a little bit. So before, after, maybe more, something like this. There you go. And last but not least, we can apply Renoiser to our image. And again, to make it more obvious, let's just set it to Super 8. So there you go. So this is before, after. So I hope that will inspire you to play around with the universe tools inside Resolve Color Page. Okay, so I think that's it from my part today. And if you have any questions, let me just switch. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me on maxoncolor@maxon.net. Okay, and don't forget to get your free t-shirt today, and the code for free t-shirts is universe for editors. And again, to check the recordings of this webinars, you can go to YouTube and type in Maxon training team, and check out the recordings there. And as you follow with the recordings, you'll get a timestamp, which is like really nice. So if you just want to skip my blabber, like me blabbering at the beginning of this show, you can just go directly to the subject that you want to learn. And thank you so much, Dr. Sasi, for providing us with the timestamps. That's like really valuable for everyone. And Anna, thank you so much. Frederick, Anna, thank you so much for joining us. And everybody else, Jazab, Yulana, Best, Hussein, thank you so much for showing up today. And I hope to see you in next 2 weeks' time. It's been great. I hope you enjoy the show. And anytime you have questions, let me know. I'm Max from Maxon Training Team. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I'll see you in next 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.